Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's Brave Guy here once again with another Frontier Signals update. So right off the bat here, we are going to be looking at Comet MAPS, and we can see some of the preliminary data here on whether or not this thing actually survived or not. And, the answer seems to be somewhere in the middle. And each one of these coronagraphs here shows something a little bit differently. So it's going to be interesting to kind of break this down. And these coronagraph images really do seem to be some of the best footage that we have so far. So starting off with the LASCO C3, we can see the comet coming in here pretty fast and it goes behind there. So the thing about this one in particular is with this instrument, we have the disk in the middle blocking out the sun so we can actually see the corona. And I believe this instrumentation has this thing here, which is actually holding that disk in place. So we can see the comet kind of, going right into that, which makes it, kind of gives the illusion that it's changing trajectory as it approaches. But I think that's purely has to do with the, the physical instrumentation here. So it's just being slightly obfuscated, kind of giving it the appearance that it changes direct trajectory. But it goes right in there and then out the other side. This one is pretty vague, so it kind of looks like a flare, kind of looks like something else. So then we take things to the LASCO C2. And okay, this one is quite different. So, it's more zoomed in. It's a lot brighter. We can see it shooting right in there. It really gains a lot of speed right on its fastest approach. And so, okay, this is the weird thing. You'll just have to take my word for it. So, when I looked at this like 20 minutes ago before I started recording, there was a time skip from roughly around 15 to 16, and then it skips 5 hours going into there. And now, I refreshed the page right before I started recording, and now all of a sudden all that missing time is there now, except we don't see anything with the comet besides just this random kind of plasma jet coming off. So that is an entirely different look as to, the rest of these. Again, each one of these seems to tell a different story for some reason. So this one, it goes right in there. We see this, flash sort of thing happening. Nothing to do with the comet. It's just because it's eclipse season. So, the moon or the Earth, I forget which, is getting in the way of the satellite. It's been doing that every day. So and then when it comes out, same thing, we kind of see some sort of jet coming off of there. So far it looks like it got vaporized, but then we look at this one. And this tells quite a different story here. I think this is going to be probably the most accurate thing to kind of base any conclusions off of. So, it comes in here, it looks like a rocket of some sort at this point. Very vivid, very bright. And then when it comes out the other side here, it does seem to come out as an actual object. But, so I believe it didn't get fully vaporized. It seems like the very nucleus of the comet is the only thing that actually survived. So it didn't get obliterated, but I wouldn't really say that it necessarily survived. I believe, take this from a non-expert, just looking at this, with my perspective, but it looks like this is just the very nucleus of the comet coming out, but I'm still not entirely sure. There doesn't seem to be any clear definitive answer right now as of, 5 p.m. Mountain time. So that is pretty much what we have to go off of. This GOES 19 Cores 1 diff seems to show the most accurate image of what we're actually looking at here. So something came out the other side, but, it could be just the remnants of the comet. I'm not exactly sure, the very nucleus of it. So anyways, that was pretty cool to see what that was going to be doing, but we'll just go ahead and take a look at everything else for the day, which there's a couple very notable things here. In terms of space weather, again, we've had a lot of small flares happening. One flare that almost reached X range, and just a whole bunch of others. But, things have finally calmed down in terms of the solar storm levels. The proton flux has been going down. And, well, let's see, we did have a flare that was supposedly hitting us today. So I'm not exactly sure where that is here. Look at the solar wind. Looks like we had another little spike there, and then it's gone back down. The BZ has been holding pretty strong. So, we may still get some disturbances going into tonight and tomorrow. But overall, we haven't really had anything too severe, so we can take a look at the 304 angstroms to actually look at the plasma. So we can see various little filaments going off here and there, but I don't think we've had anything majorly Earth-directed or really anything too major in general. So, of course, this is buffering now, so just give me 1 second. Alright, so yeah, this region right here in the middle seems to be fairly active, but it hasn't released anything major right now. It's just kind of spitting out little sparks. I don't know why it's doing that. The whole video is definitely buffered. It's just because I'm recording. But you can tell that, there's not any major extra CMEs coming our way. And just for the fun of it here, we can take a look at some of the magnetic field lines, because those are always cool. Again, I'm not really exactly sure how to read these or, what's exactly going on, if any of it is significant. But it's always kind of cool here, so you can come to the website. I have descriptions under each and every single one of these charts, kind of explaining things. And in the future here, I will be making some videos that kind of go in depth with some of these charts, but even for every single angstrom wavelength, we have descriptions that kind of discern what are the different factors between each of these different wavelengths and, what it actually shows. So I would definitely come and take a look at that if you're curious how a lot of these space weather feeds actually work. There's descriptions for every single one of these, except for, the aurora forecast, because I feel like that one's a little bit more self-explanatory. And we haven't really had too much else going on in terms of that. The sunspots are finally starting to depart, and we don't have anything significant that'll be coming into view anytime soon. So there's a couple of spots over on the far side, and those will still take, a week or two for those to get here. So we should have maybe a little quiet period and all that. So let's take things into the earthquakes, where we have a couple of interesting developments here. So once again, on the slow slip tremor map for the West Coast, we do again have continued tremor activity. Let me just really quickly make sure. Yeah, that should be fully updated. So there is continued slow slip events going on here. And the other main thing is a new earthquake happened in central Australia. So this is a pretty rare earthquake, not a big earthquake, nothing to really fuss about. But, it does kind of bring a bigger picture perspective on the entire Indo-Australian plate. And along with that, we do have a few notable deep events that happen. Not very deep, but, what we have a 6 over here in the same kind of cluster area in Indonesia from the previous 7 that struck. And then we have a 5.2 and a 4.6. So all these are between 90 to 100 kilometers deep. And, they all happen relatively in succession here. And along with everything else that we've been seeing throughout the week, it really seems like something major has been going on in the entire Indo-Australian plate. We have movement going all the way around. So the entire plate boundary extends all the way over here, going up close to Africa. And we've had 3 7s. So the other 7 that happened here was more than a week ago now. But I believe it was still within 10 days from now. So, we've had a tremendous amount of activity going on, as well as now we see Australia now having signs of activity as well. So, this was potentially actually forecasted by Dutchsinse. So I just want to kind of bring that up really quickly here. I haven't had the full time or chance to go through his forecast and exactly what he said, but there is another channel that has been posting the kind of condensed versions of his live streams for those that either cannot access it or don't have the time to. So this is from yesterday, and it seems like he did indeed reference Australia. So I don't know how specific it is though, but overall, forecasting something like this, even if it's relatively general, is still miles ahead of what anyone else is doing seismically. So, Australia has not seen any activity even close to this in a pretty long time. So the fact that he wasn't really talking about it until yesterday, and then the next day it happens. So, take that for what you will. That's why I'm kind of, double checking and, unofficially collaborating with other research to kind of see, what has merit to it. So, there are some second guesses that I have with some of his research and some of his methods, but I'm still open-minded enough to see what is happening for myself and compare that to what others such as him are saying about things. So, I'm still using his overlay, etc. So just kind of, comparing things, but moving on from that, let's drag it back down to the last day or so. So we still see a lot of the same continued activity in the tremor stacks here, and maybe even a slight increase down in Texas. And, we're still kind of waiting on some larger activity to potentially strike the other side of the Pacific now that we've seen everything over here pretty much move. But so far we haven't had too much. And then going into Europe, so we did have some slightly bigger activity here. So we have a 5 and, continued activity going on here in Greece. And then we do have a new 3.2 over here in Italy, and then a somewhat deep 2.5 just kind of over here in the mountain range. So again, nothing too major, but just wanted to cover all of that. And all right, so let's take a look at what else there is here. So we have the volcanic activity. Nothing is really jumping out there either. So, a lot of the continued spots having the ongoing volcanic eruptions. And really the last thing I'm going to cover is just a couple more clips from the dust storms happening. So this seems to be happening over a very large area, and especially in these two here, you can just see, like from what I mentioned, I think yesterday, some of these areas literally are just like they look like they're on Mars with the dust, affecting the areas. So we have Libya, Greece, Turkey, and Pakistan. So that's a pretty large region over there that is experiencing these events. So, eventually here soon I want to kind of pinpoint the whole region that was affected and just kind of show that, because it seems like quite a large area is having these dust storms here. So pretty devastating, pretty horrible, but that's pretty much what's going on. So anyways, I'll just kind of wrap things up there. Hope you all enjoyed, got something out of it. Please like and subscribe for more. Share this video if you dare, and as always, I will catch you all in the next.